Hello everyone, this is Nevernan, and today we'll be doing a video talking a little bit about post-Gliscor flying. So, I know I touched on a lot of stuff about this in my previous video, talking about like the ramifications of Gliscor's ban, but it's been a week, and we've had some time to play with the mons and see how Gliscor's ban would affect flying, and I think it's impacted flying a bit more than I thought it would. That isn't to say that I didn't think it would be affected at all, but it definitely does feel a little bit harder to make the type of work. And I think its viability definitely will take a little bit of a hit as a result. Granted, we still haven't figured out what's the best stuff to run on flying at the moment, but I do definitely think that there are a couple of things that are going to become very apparent with the type, especially after this 1 week. Now, to be fair, we still need like either a major team tour or a little bit more time to really solidify what's really the best on the type. But for now, I think that these viability ranking suggestions that I've made are good, and I'll also share some team structures and a couple of games that I've looked at that should show where we are, at least at the moment, when it comes to how flying is being run. So, without further ado, let's just talk a little bit about my post. So, I made a post on the viability rankings. Now, it hasn't gotten any reactions yet, so I think people may have just not seen it, but I did discuss 3 rises that I think should happen due to Gliscor's ban, and I have the reasoning here if you want to read it. But as a TLDR, I think Lander's Therian should rise due to the fact that it is a electric commune rocker, and that is one of the things that Gliscor could do, one of the things, but it also is just a somewhat decent defensive Pokemon, and it's also a good pivot. And now that Gliscor is gone, you don't really have that option to run both Landorus Incarnate and Gliscor at the same time. To get best of both worlds for your electric communities, now you have to run either Landorus Therian or Landorus Incarnate. And because of that decision making, that is why I wouldn't put either form in S. Because especially with the new S rules, you can't put both of them in the S tier. Even if they were, because I don't even think they both deserve to be S tier, to be honest. Even though I do think having a ground or electric community is definitely imperative to the type, I don't think it would be possible to put both of these guys in S tier, because one isn't significantly better than the other, I would say. I think both are still very viable, and the fact that you can't run one with the other just makes it a little bit tricky, which is very unusual for most Pokemon, because most Pokemon are usually locked like that, and aren't usually that drastically different from each other, but in this case, it is kind of a big issue for Landorus and Landorus Therian. But yeah, both forms are at A rank in my opinion. And let's just move on from that. Next rise I have is for Thundurus Therian. I think Thundurus isn't necessarily... The Thundurus Therian nomination is definitely a little bit sketchy, I will agree, but the reason I put it as a rise is because of its electric community. Now, there are like a couple of other electric communities, like I said, we mentioned Landorus before, but I definitely think this guy's electric community is going to be a little bit more important, especially for more offensive builds of flying, and especially for balanced teams as well, that want to have a special attacker, but also need to fit 2 immunities so that Landorus isn't very focused down, because Landorus is very easy to wear down compared to Gliscor. So it's going to be a bit difficult for flying to really manage that, especially if it's their sole electric community. So they need a second one that can help deal with stray stuff, like, for example, a Raging Bolt Thunderclap, or even just a Choice Scarfer who's locked into Thunderbolt as well. And you don't have to make super hard 50-50s or have to like constantly wear down Landorus Therian on rocks to constantly swap it in. You could just have Thundurus with heavy duty boots and Double Dance, or even a Choice Scarf set that just does its thing, and it also is just good against water, and with Focus Blast it can do a number on the Double Steel Core, of Dragon, and also inadvertently also kind of messed up Dark a little bit, especially since this thing does learn Vacuum Wave, so sorry about that. I had to take care of something in the background, but I think before I got off, I was discussing Thunderous Therian. So, just to quickly go back over that, yes, I do think Thunderous Therian is semi-decent on the type, especially as a secondary electric immunity, but I definitely think that is not the greatest, which is why I have it at C rank. Because initially I was going to rate it B, but I think that might be jumping the gun a little bit too much, especially since I'm already jumping the gun a bit with these nominations, so I'll be a bit more tame and put it at C. And lastly, we have the big nomination, which is Dragonite from A to S. Dragonite, I feel, personally, has always been an S-rank mon, and I think that with Gliscor's removal, its utility and offensive prowess cannot be understated. Because with multi-scale, it can just take a free Dragon-type attack, or just a free strong attack in general, and then be able to do a bunch of damage in return, with either the Choice Band set or the Dragon Band set. And it also just has the option to be a defensive wall as well, with Thunder Wave, Dragon Tail, and Roost in another defensive move of your choice. But the main thing that Dragonite, especially now, presents is a electric neutrality, which, while it isn't an immunity, a neutrality is still a very big deal against specific attackers. Because a neutrality is all you need for something like Raging Bolt to become a little bit easier to maintain. Since it can't Thunderclap your Dragonite, excuse me, right out of the gate. And Dragonite can threaten Raging Bolt with a +1 Outrage, or it can also just use Extreme Speed or something of that line. So, yes, the neutrality is very important. Even for Choice Scarf Thunderbolters, but yeah. Triple Axle will still be an issue for it from Meowscarada, and Ice Beam from Greninja is also still going to be a relatively big concern from it, especially depending on the sets. But I think overall, Dragonite is just a lot more important to have on flying teams now, due to the electric neutrality and just the fact that it has always been very solid. So yeah. That would be it for those nominations. But now let's take a look at a couple of games. So, right here I have two seasonals games that actually just happened. Hold on a moment. I need to hide this chat real quick. But yeah. Right here we have Captain Kraken versus Adjustments. Now, the only reason I'm highlighting these is because even though they're just seasonal matches, and some people don't bring up super serious. Wait, how did it come back? That was weird. Okay, for whatever reason it keeps bringing it back, so I guess I just have to get rid of all these for now. But yeah. Yeah, let's just watch this replay. So, before we get into the deeper stuff, we should talk a little bit about how Captain Kraken and Adjustments are prepped here. So, obviously, Adjustments is bringing a little bit of a weird team with Bombardier. I actually don't know what the proper pronunciation for it is yet, but what I do know is that this thing is one of the few other stealth rockers that flying has access to. Now, I'm not sure if I'm super convinced that it is going to be one of the best stealth rockers of the type, especially with Gliscor's departure. Excuse me, but I do think with if you want to use Landorus Incarnate, maybe it is an option you should consider. especially since Dark Flying is actually not that bad of a typing, as we've seen with Bandabuzz on Dark itself, so let's see how this goes. And yes, Captain Kraken also bringing a Landorus Incarnate team. Notably, both teams have Dragonite. And Captain Kraken is opting to skip out on a Tornadus Therian and is going to use Gyarados instead, along with Zapdos. So these two teams are kind of different already in the way that they are styled. So let's just see how the game itself goes. So we're going to see the Intimidate immediately from Gyarados, and a Waterfall, getting a flinch on the Bombardier, and there's the rocks that I was talking about. Waterfall is going to fail to get the 2-hit KO, as Dragonite now comes in. Gyarados going to go for the taunt, which will disable the Dragon Dance, but it appears that Adjustments is the ban set, so we're going to see Gyarados get 1-hit KO there. Corviknight is going to opt to take a Outrage and a U-turn as a response. Dragonite is forced to use Outrage again, so Enamorus can just freely get a pick off of it. Tornadus coming in as Captain Kraken swaps into Landorus, who's going to take... Oh, it will not take a speed drop, but it does not matter since Tornadus is still extremely fast. Tornadus also Adjustment's also opting for a Life Orb Tornadus, interestingly enough. Which actually isn't super bad due to Regenerator helping a lot, but you have to make sure that those rocks stay off the field in order for that to be worth. As we see the Nasty Plot come in from Adjustments' Landorus. That's a really scary Landorus right there. As the Psychic will get the KO on Corviknight, Namorous is going to come in as a result, but Captain Kraken will double out into Zapdos, predicting the Corviknight swap. Discharge going to do a decent chunk to the Corviknight, as we're going to see the static proc on the Corviknight as well. That else is going to be very annoying to deal with, as we see a Mist Hurricane from Captain Kraken, which will be unfortunately crucial, as that means the Landorus does get to live. Dragonite probably confirmed to be banned here, so we're going to see Extreme Speed, not going to do a ton to Corviknight, and the Rocky Helmet isn't going to help either. As we're going to see another attempt. It looks like he was going to go for the Yellow Magic, but unfortunately it would not go through. Namorous is going to come in now to try and salvage the situation, maybe get a Healing Wish off. No, instead Captain Kraken opts for the FF, which makes sense because he is in a really bad spot at this point. But yeah, no. We can already see here that flying is just way easier to dismantle. Because Adjustments didn't even have really any like Ice-type moves on his team. Because his Dragonite didn't have an Ice-type move, and he just relied on the strength of his Landorus. I think maybe before, even still with Gliscor, this team would have probably fallen apart pretty quickly. But Gliscor just not being able to essentially like sit on certain things and toxic them and stall them out as effectively, I think that definitely makes a very large change in how Flying wants to play their matchups. So maybe we might see a little bit more bulky offense and offensive variance now that Gliscor just isn't like the catch-all for their more semi-stallish team types. But we have one more replay to look at before we can make any assumptions, so let's just go here. And yes, spoiler alert, Adjustments does lose, but let's see how that happens, right? So here we already see the Landorus Therian, and we see Thunderous Therian as well. So that is one team archetype I actually am going to talk about later. But yes, as you can see, Elgapon is getting a lot done as we see this substitute Landorus come in immediately. So for instance, use by Captain Kraken to recover from the Intimidate debuffs, as Landorus is now going to keep using Earthquake to eliminate the Elgapon. Leftover is very important as it needs to get that recovery as much as it can. Articuno is going to swap into the Ninetales. Actually is able to take a Flamethrower relatively well. But the U-turn is going to go through. Articuno at very low HP, but Articuno is probably not going to last long into this matchup anyway. As we see the Earth Power go through, unfortunately not getting the KO on Ninetales, as we see another Articuno swap in. Heatran now coming in. Balloon ready to go, as the Heavy Slam will come through and then get rid of the Articuno. Corviknight's not going to come in, dodging the Magma Storm successfully as the Body Press goes off and pops the Balloon. Fortunately, Corviknight will not dodge the second one, but Landorus Therian is now in a very good spot, as Heatran without Balloon can no longer stop its Earthquake Sweep. So how will Captain Kraken manage this? Right, I completely forgot the Landorus is not Choice Scarf, so it is going to instead be able to deal with it just fine. Landorus is going to recover its leftovers, so Cinderace is going to come in and threaten it. Bombirdier has a Focus Sash, but it will still get KO'd, as Cinderace is just too strong under the sun. Volcarona going to come in, as Cinderace will use the Healing Wish. Landorus is going to be full HP again. We see a Quiver Dance come through on the Volcarona. Smackdown, not going to successfully KO it, sadly, as the Fiery Dance is going to do a lot of damage. Smackdown going to get the KO, but unfortunately Captain Kraken is just in too favorable a spot because Cerulege is right there, and with the Sun Boost and Bitter Blade, Landorus will fall and Captain Kraken will win. Now, if you want to figure out who won this series overall, you're going to have to look at it yourself. But, yeah. I will say, in terms of how flying teams are structured, adjustments this team, while a bit experimental, and I do respect the attempt with it, it definitely was not, it's not good into Fire, but Fire was always a bad matchup for flying anyway, so now it's even worse, and this does seem about right for what it was, because before Gliscor could have done some nonsense against Heatran, for example. It could just use Knockoff and Earthquake and just kept protecting its Magma Storms and just doing all sorts of unfun and nonsense to the Heatran. Same thing could be said about the Volcarona unless it had Substitute, and even the Ninetales essentially would just be like setup food for it if it had Sword Stance set. A lot of Gliscor could have done a lot of things against the Fire team here, but without the Gliscor, Landorus just gets worn down. As you can see, Landorus got the worn down really quickly, and it desperately needed that Enamorous Healing Wish in order to stay in the game. And even with the Healing Wish, still ended up getting broken through pretty easily, as opposed to Gliscor, who can just afford to stay in as much as it wants. And yeah, no, it was just a really hard game for adjustments to win here. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm now going to show you guys a little bit of my builder to really go and show what is going on there. So I have two teams currently. They're both very experimental, but I think both do showcase a lot of what I think is going to happen with flying, at least from what I'm going to try at least. So first thing I want to talk about is Landorus Therian and what I think the sets will be. So obviously, I think Smackdown and a Ground-type move are definitely going to be imperative on Landorus Therian if you're not going to be using a Choice Scarf set. Because obviously, if you're using Choice Scarf, you're not going to use Smackdown, you're going to use Stone Edge or Rock Slide, whichever one is more important to you. But the one thing I do want to talk about is Earth Power. So Earth Power is something that OU uses a lot, and I think it's for King Gambit. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know it's for dealing with physical walls and physically defensive Pokemon in general. Because I think Corviknight runs physically defensive. I'm not sure if it's either Corviknight or Skarmory. I don't follow OU super heavily this generation, but I do know that Smackdown and Earth Power is definitely meant to mess up a lot of physical attackers or physically defensive Pokemon that are like Steel types. So Earth Power essentially allows you to get through like a lot of Intimidate nonsense and also defense boosting nonsense. And since Archaludon is banned, I believe, in OU, this is actually very important in Monotype because Monotype still has Archaludon in a tier. And with Archaludon still in a tier, that means we have to deal with stamina boosts and all that fun stuff. And Flying definitely does need a little bit of help dealing with Archaludon in general, since its special attackers aren't really that great at breaking through it. Because think about it, we have Enamorous, and we have Tornadus Therian, we also have, we have Landorus, but obviously we can't use that version of Landorus because we have this Landorus instead. So if we don't want to use that Landorus, and we still want to have a way to deal with Archaludon, I think this is probably one of the best ways to get around it, is to use the Earth Power. Now, the spread I have is very experimental. I wouldn't really highly suggest it until I figure out like what's really good, because this special attack breakpoint doesn't really do anything. It gives me like a 6.3% chance to one-hit KO the Archaeodon, which, I mean, if I get it, that's huge, but if I don't get it, it's like too much speed to give up. And the speed I have right now is meant to outspeed a max speed Raging Bull, I believe. So, and this just allows you to not have to play like nonsense 50-50s. Or not even nonsense 50-50s, it just allows you to outspeed like the max speed builds that can possibly use Draco Meteor on you, and you could just break through it immediately. Now granted, you are going to be using Earth Power, so Calm Mindsets are going to be a bit better against you, but I do think that overall Earth Power is just a lot easier, or a lot better in the long term, since you can't get intimidated and you can't get your special attack lowered very easily, especially since most people are going to be expecting Earthquake and respecting Earthquake as well. And you kind of play against the set, you also just have to respect it. It's not going to be guaranteed that someone's going to be using Earth Power, so you kind of have to wait until it's revealed to really know if they have Earth Power or not. And downsides of using Earth Power aren't even really that big. I think the biggest target you miss out on is hitting Hisuian Gudra with the Earth Power, but they still have to play the 50-50 with Archaeodon anyway, so if they don't know if you're Earth Power or Earthquake, they can't really assume that you're going to be Earth Power, because if they swap in Hisuian Gudra into your Earthquake Landorus Therian, they just lose Hisuian Gudra for free, and it's like, they're arguably even more screwed. So yeah, no, it's way too important for them to play that 50-50 properly, so I think Earth Power is still okay, but yeah. I wouldn't say my spread is optimal, but I definitely think that this set is definitely decent. Now, there is another Landorus Therian set that I do want to talk about before we move on. So, there is one more, and I think this might be the most popular one that gets run. Let me see if the builder has it by default. Yes, it does. So, this set right here, the Substitute Bulk Up set, this is going to probably end up being one of the more common sets that gets run, because this is notably a Steel Killer. I think this is called the Steel Killer set, but yeah. Essentially, you got Substitute, Bulk Up, and Steel can't really do a ton about it. If you send in Skarmory just dies to Bulk Up, and because you're raising your defenses, the only way for Skarmory to deal with it is to Whirlwind it, and yeah, no, Skarmory doesn't really want to deal with that. God forbid you also have because once again, you have to remember it might have to play 50-50 with Earth Power, and even if it doesn't run the 50-50 with Earth Power and it knows you're physical, Skarmory still doesn't want to get knocked down, because that's still really bad for it. But yeah, no, it's really annoying to deal with this set specifically, since it can just solo all of Steel if you manage to deal with Skarmory through proper play or through having a Moltres on your team. So yeah, this set is also super annoying. It could be a really good win condition. It's also incredibly bulky, because if you see the spread, it's fully defensive, and it's just relying on Landorus' really high base attack to make up the high base attack and the bulk up boost to make up for when it loses in power outright. Because 326 is still like a usable attack stat, despite the fact that it's not boosted. So yeah, this set is definitely going to be very good, especially when paired with Thunderous Therian, who can now opt for a Choice Scarf set, which allows it to revenge kill a lot of fast water types like Choice Scarf or Choice Specs Greninja, who can be very annoying. And also Vacuum Wave is also another thing I want to talk about with Thunderous, because I don't have it on the Thunderous set I have right now, but yes, I believe this thing does learn Vacuum Wave, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just see if it does real quick. Oh, it does not. I'm sorry. So that's misinformation. I forget what flying type does learn Vacuum Wave, but yeah. Dang, it really doesn't learn Vacuum Wave. Okay, so it still does learn Focus Blast though, so Steel types do have to be afraid of it. If it did learn Vacuum Wave, it would have been really nice, because that would have helped Flying deal with Greninja and Yaskarada a little bit, but yeah. I must be mistaken it with another mod, because I remember something else learned Vacuum Wave. That may have been on flying. I do not remember what it was, though. But yeah, regardless, this one is still going to be a really good pairing with Landorus Therian, since Landorus Therian kind of hits like a lot of the physical threats and, or not the physical threats, but especially defensive threats, and Thunderous hits all the physically defensive threats and not the especially defensive threats. So it is very important for these two to be working together to kind of take down each other's checks. And of course they're both immune to electricity, so it also helps that the team as well for these two to kind of just be working off of each other. But yeah, the Focus Blast is going to be probably a move of quite high priority as well, since you don't want Thunderous to just be forced out by the presence of any steel type, namely Archaludon or Suing Gudra, the ones that have a fighting chance against them with at least Focus Blast. And this thing does learn Volt Switch, so it is easy to pivot out with it, especially with the Choice Scarf set, so yeah. But that's it for them, and yeah, you can see here I opted instead for a setup set on Thunderous Therian. I don't think this may be the best set possible, but I do think that the idea of heavy-duty boots is important, because if it's going to not run Choice Scarf, I think heavy-duty boots with setup is probably going to be a better way to run this thing. And then pair this with a good defensive core with Corviknight, Tornadus Therian, and your choice of Skarmory or Moltres. I think I like Skarmory more because Spikes is just really imperative to have, but Moltres does help you in that Steel matchup, and it also helps you deal with certain U-turn spam as well. Or specific U-turn spammers, but yeah. Skarmory also helps with that, but burning them versus removing 16% of their HP is definitely like a niche that you want, so because removing 16% of their HP still allows them to fight another day, but if they get burnt, it completely ruins the Pokemon, right? So yeah, Dragonite here is just a defensive set. I wouldn't say this is the optimal set either. I could probably just run a setup set and still be fine for the most part, but the reason I ended up going defensive was because I wanted to make sure that my backbone was good, and so I slowed down enough of their threats and had enough utility to make sure that these two could do their job properly. So yeah, the spread and the set itself are not completely well done, because I don't really know the best possible defensive Dragonite set. I know that there are good defensive Dragonite sets, but there are none on the builder by default, and I haven't been able to get in contact with anyone who has any of the good ones, so I need to either figure out the best one myself, or I have to keep asking around. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that team. And then this team I've actually had a little bit more success with recently. But yeah, same set idea on Landorus Therian, and then we just had a defensive core. This time I have offensive Dragonite paired with Choice Scarf for Gamers. And this time I opted for Moltres instead, heavily relying on rocks here, and this is actually the reason why I swapped Skarmory on the other teams, because I think Spikes is just much better to have, especially with the way current flying is going to be. So something like Moltres just isn't going to cut it for me. But yeah, no. I also really do want to put Scorching Sands on the Moltres so that Heatran doesn't just get a free swap in. But it's going to be hard, I believe, to fit it, because the rest of these moves are a little bit too good. A little Lisp especially is just far too important to have, since this basically allows you to not be super passive. But yeah, it just depends. And also, I think mods like Moltres and Articuno are actually going to be a lot worse on Fly, because now that they don't have Gliscor to just reliably take the knockoffs for them, something on Flying is going to lose its item. And I said this before in the Gliscor video, but if something on Flying is forced to lose its item, that kind of breaks the entire team apart really quickly, and Flying doesn't really have a lot of mons that can afford to lose their item. Like, Tornadus Therian can kinda afford to lose its item sometimes, but I'd still say it's really bad if it loses either its Assault Vest or its other item, like I actually don't know what else it usually runs. There's like Life Orb, I believe, but yeah, even if it's a different item, Tornado Styrian does not like losing its item that much. It's probably the best candidate to lose its item, but I wouldn't say it really likes losing its item that much. I think Skarmory is the other one that might like losing, that can still function while losing its item, but it would still really like that Rocky Helmet so that it can get that chip damage. So again, flying is going to be losing something if you run knockoff. And I encountered this when I played against a Royal on the ladder, who I think he was in the 1700s or high 1600s. I don't remember what the elo was, but yeah, I played against him with this team on against the standard dragon team, and I just struggled to break through him because I was having a really hard time dealing with the fact that every time his Hisuian Gudra came in, I had to lose an item from one of my Pokemon. So I tried to use Tornado Styrian, but Tornado Styrian would just be very much less bulky against the rest of his team, and it's just still, especially with rocks still everywhere, and the fact that he was Dragon Tailing my entire team with Hisuian Gudra and giving me the business, it was just really difficult for me to really get around that, because before, Gliscor could just constantly come in and force out Hisuian Gudra. Now, if I try to put in Landorus and do the same thing, I just get worn down really quickly, because I'm going to get hit by the rocks, and then I'm going to get hit by the Dragon Tail as well. Even if he is intimidated, it's still going to do a decent amount of damage. And then I'm going to be forced out, and then I have to swap him back in every time Hisuian Gudra comes back in. And granted, my Landorus doesn't really have a good matchup against Hisuian Gudra, because I'm Earth Power instead of Earthquake. But even if I was Earthquake, the Hisuian Gudra is still just going to be really obnoxious for me to deal with. So, yeah, it's really frustrating. How flying has to kind of just play around Dragon Tail and phasing now, but I think that is probably for the better in the metagame, since it creates a lot less frustration around the type, but definitely a way bigger hit to flying, and I think a lot of other mobs might not be as viable with the absence of Gliscor. Like I said, the Cantonian birds outside of Zapdos are probably going to suffer a little bit with the lack of knockoff absorber on the team. So yeah, that'll be it for this video discussing what I've been seeing on flying. I would say there still definitely needs to be some stuff looked at. Like I said, all of this is based on conjecture and from my very little experience from the ladder and from what I've seen in a couple of games. So there's still a lot to be discovered. We'll see if maybe Bombardier is actually the method, or if maybe Landorus Styrian isn't as good as I think it's going to be, and regular Landorus is still going to be preferred, and maybe Skarmory starts running Stealth Rock or something. We'll see how this metagame progresses, or how the flying metagame progresses at least. But as it is right now, I definitely think flying is significantly weaker, a lot weaker than I thought it would be. Because losing that knockoff absorber really, really hurts the type in practice. So, yeah, without further ado, this will be the end of the video, and I hope all of you will have a great day, and remember to take care of yourselves.